Listen twice without subtitles, then listen once with text. After that, retell the story out loud or in writing. Don't forget the vocabulary below. Ready?
On the evening of October 30th, 1938, Thomas Doyle stood on his front steps in Maplefield, New Jersey, breathing the damp air and watching the fog curl along the street like slow smoke. Jack-o'-lanterns flickered on porches, their grin-shaped mouths trembling each time the wind slid through the oaks. Children in simple masks chased one another across yards, and somewhere a radio played a cheerful tune that did not fit the misty night. Tom had just turned 17 that month. He liked baseball and fixing bicycles at Mr. Russo's shop, and he had a careful way of listening that made adults trust him. But tonight the town felt different, as if the fog carried a secret. His mother had gone to the church kitchen to help bake pumpkin pies for the harvest sale, and his father drove late buses on weekends. Tom turned back inside, shut the door against the cold, and tuned the family radio to the Sunday drama hour. He had heard of the Mercury Theater, but did not know much about it. The announcer sounded calm and important, like a man who could explain anything. Tom put another log into the coal stove, pushed the rocking chair closer, and waited for the story to begin. It began like a normal concert, with a polite orchestra and a weather report. Then the voice cut in from a place called Grover's Mill, not far from Maplefield, describing a strange cylinder that had fallen from the sky. The reporter spoke fast, and the sound of worried people rose and broke behind him. Tom sat up. His heart tightened, not because he believed in monsters, but because the reporter kept returning again and again, with bulletins that sounded exactly like real news. Soldiers were on the way. Towns nearby were closing roads. Something was moving inside the cylinder. The stove snapped. The clock on the wall clicked past 8. Outside, the fog grew thicker, so thick that the street lamp became a blurred coin. When the radio described heat like a blast and a long metallic scream, Tom flinched and remembered the distant factory sirens that sometimes echoed down the river at night. A siren did sound now, thin and far, not from the factory but from the firehouse on Pine Street. It was probably a drill or a fallen lantern somewhere, yet it linked itself with the voice on the radio. Tom stood, knocked his knee on the chair, and reached for his coat. He thought of his mother with flour on her hands and the good people at the church, and of his father steering a bus filled with late riders. If there were poison gas or something worse, they would need him. The announcer declared that National Guard units were fighting a machine that walked on legs of steel. Tom switched off the radio and stepped into the fog. The world outside was small and silver, the nearest houses pressing close like ships in a harbor. Porch lights floated in the haze. Jack-o'-lanterns watched from the steps with eyes cut into triangles, and their candle flames shook as if frightened. He ran. The street fell away beneath his boots, and his breath made clouds. On Maple Street, Mrs. Hanley stepped out in her robe and asked if the noise meant anything. Tom told her to go back inside in wet towels for the windows because he remembered that from a poster about air raids. She stared at him, then nodded. The siren faded and came again. Tom crossed the trolley tracks and cut through the park, where the swings looked like bones in the fog. In the distance, a dog howled, and the sound seemed to travel up from the ground itself. By the time he reached the church, several neighbors had gathered near the steps, their faces pale, their voices low. Someone had brought a sack of bread, as if for a siege. The kitchen windows shone yellow, and Tom saw his mother moving behind the glass, lifting a tray and setting it carefully on the counter. He burst inside, and the smell of sugar, spice, and hot dough wrapped around him like a blanket. "Mom," he said, and the women turned, their aprons dotted with flour. "We have to get to the hall. They say invaders are near. A man on the radio said machines are walking out of the fields." His mother put down the tray with a firm hand. "Thomas Doyle," she said, using the name that meant she was serious. "You look ready to faint. What invaders? From where?" Tom explained as quickly as he could. stumbling over the parts about heat rays and armies. A few of the women crossed themselves. "Maybe it is just a mistake," said Mrs. Kelly, but her voice lacked any color. Tom shook his head. "They kept breaking into the music with reports. They said Grover's Mill. That is not far at all." He thought of his father on the bus route that sometimes cut along the edge of that place. A decision formed in him like a knot pulled tight. He told his mother he would go to the depot and then to the town hall, where people would gather and share news. She pressed a bun into his hand, told him to keep his scarf up, and promised to follow with the church ladies. Tom ran again, this time with a purpose that steadied his steps. The fog carried the smell of wet leaves and coal smoke. On Elm Street, he saw two men loading boxes into a truck, their breath white in the air. "You hear it?" one asked. "I hear enough," the other said, fastening the rope as if tying a boat. At the depot, the benches were empty, the ticket window shut. A paper cup rolled on the floor. Tom looked down the tracks, half expecting to see a light exploding like sunrise. Nothing moved but the fog itself, slipping between the rails and pooling in the weeds. He turned toward Town Hall, which sat like a square, serious ship at the center of Maplefield, with a flag that hung limp in the damp air. The steps were wet and dark. Inside, the lobby lights were on, and a few police officers stood with their hats in their hands, talking in quick whispers. People were gathering in the meeting room. Shopkeepers, mothers, a farmer with mud on his boots, a boy from Tom's class still wearing his costume cape. They were all speaking at once. A clerk banged a gavel. "Quiet, Chief Morrison will tell us what he knows." Tom squeezed between two neighbors until he could see the front. The chief stepped up and wiped his brow. "Listen, folks," he said. "State police checked. The station confirms it. What you heard was a radio play by Mr. Orson Welles. There is no attack.